Gents, let's now focus on a big game coming up in the Champions League. The group stage is kicking off, and AC Milan against Newcastle United. Nick Mendola, going to come to you straight away. I mean, huge game at the San Siro. We've got Milan's US players against Newcastle, just buzzing to be back in the big time in the Champions League. What are your thoughts as our resident Newcastle fan here at PST? Because this is what it's all about for the Magpies, right?
I mean, it is. It's a scary time. I'm really hopeful that Sandro Tonali passes fit after picking up a knock as the former AC Milan player. That part's going to be exciting. These are just two big names in the game. This reminds me of when I first started following Newcastle. AC Milan was probably the best team in the world. I mean, literally at the turn of the century, that was it. And I think, Joe, you went to the San Siro, would have been Inter Milan, I think, though, right? When Saints qualified for Europa League. And there's just something special about it. But I also think the reason I say that is if you're Newcastle, you're playing Brentford on Saturday, and then you're going to Milan, and you're 1-3. Shouldn't you be prioritizing Brentford, even though you're returning to the Champions League? This is where they wanted to be. And kind of like we said with Greg Berhalter, there's the headache of, yes, I'm in the Champions League, but what do I do now? There's a lot of players there, and they're not in form right now. So let's hope the international break was kind of them. What would you prioritize?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. The romantic in me would say it's the Champions League. It only might come around once every few years. So prioritize that and just kind of see what happens in the Premier League. But I don't know. You're right about the San Siro, by the way. When I went there, it was one of those stadiums that you're like, oh, I've seen photos of it. I've seen it on TV. When I was younger, I had an encyclopedia of football, and there was a stadium section, and the San Siro was always at the front and center. And I remember flicking through it and be like, oh, it'd be great to go there one day. I was lucky enough to do that. And this thing was just hanging in the air like it was part of just the mountain. It was, I can't really describe it until you go there. And for Newcastle's fans to get the opportunity to go there, the players, even some Eddie Howe, he's not managed in Europe before. So this is a big deal for him to test his wits against Milan on a big night in the Champions League. Yeah, I think you have to prioritize this if you're Newcastle. But I mean, Andy, when we look at AC Milan on the other side, Christian Pulisic, he's been excellent early on in his AC Milan career. Seems like it's a better fit for him than at Chelsea, or is it still too early to say that? I mean, fingers crossed, injury-wise, he stays fit for an entire season. We never got to see that at Chelsea, and that was a big part of it. But it feels like, to me, he's very comfortable and at home, and the style they're playing and everything else around it, he just seems to be at ease, right? And I'm really excited to see him back in the Champions League as a USMNT fan.
It's interesting to look back on his time at Chelsea now that he's no longer there, and kind of compare how we felt when he made the move and the excitement that was there that, well, Chelsea want an American player for this amount of money. Surely they've got big plans for him. But then you remember Chelsea and Manchester United and a lot of Premier League clubs have wanted a lot of players for a lot of money and then had no idea how to use them once they got them. And that always kind of felt like the scenario with Pulisic. It was a lot of different managers coming in, a lot of different tactical systems, and you're going to play this way, you're going to play that way, and this way and that way. And there was never consistency or continuity. And he's only a month in, sure, to playing for AC Milan, but there has been some of that. He's playing over on the right, but it's a little bit more narrow, I think. And so it allows him to be a little bit more involved in some of the build-up and get in front of goal where, he's pretty good. He's maybe not going to lead any leagues in assists and obviously not goals, but you put him in front of goal with a sight of it and the ball at his feet, he's going to put a shot on target. He's a pretty clinical player for someone who's not an out-and-out forward. And I think that's probably, we're now figuring out he's reaching an age where we can kind of say, okay, this is the type of player that he is. Because up until this point, it's been about development. What's he going to become? And looking at it from a U.S. men's national team perspective, that's great. That's exactly what I want him trying to do, is to be that secondary scorer behind, hopefully, Balogun, and provide a bunch of goals for the national team. So it just feels like, I think to your point, Joe, that it's a right fit. And that was all we ever wanted. We talked for multiple transfer windows. Well, he probably needs to go somewhere else. Well, then where? Well, we could go to this big giant club. Yeah, he probably gets lost in the shuffle there. AC Milan had a plan for him. They went out and got him, and he is now executing that plan almost to perfection. 3 games, 3 starts so far. Fingers crossed for the fitness.
Absolutely. I think it's great to see him firing on all cylinders for Milan early on, and excited to see what he does, especially in that battle against, it looks like it'll be Kieran Trippier, potentially, or, Dan Burn, I guess, on the other side, if he does start on the right. So, yeah, some interesting battles for them there tactically, depending on what Newcastle do and where Pulisic drifts, because he is a drifter. He loves to just get around the pitch and pop up in some dangerous positions, which he's been doing a lot of Milan, and hopefully does that a lot more for them over the next few seasons. Nick, Newcastle, up and down start to the season, like you said, in the Premier League. I mean, I feel like a lot of these players will just be happy to actually play it in the Champions League and kind of get that over and done with in terms of, all right, we qualified, this is a huge deal. Let's actually start the Champions League group stage and stop talking about it. And then maybe their focus has kind of been in the back of their mind for the start of the Premier League season. Is that fair enough? I mean, it's kind of just human nature, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. Look, I'm trying not to sound cynical when I say this. I think their best route to going back to Europe is to drop into the Europa League and win it. I really worry the tests that we've seen and the lessons that Eddie Howe is learning right now. The performance against Liverpool, up a man was abject. I mean, I know Alisson Becker was great, but he's great against a lot of teams and Liverpool doesn't win. Man City was brilliant against them in showcasing a different way to win. And then Brighton, he got cooked by another angry squad. And so if I'm looking at Eddie Howe, I think this will ultimately, he's going to figure out the right mix for them, but it's going to take quite a while. And the only thing that really works for them right now is that while they're worried about Brentford, AC Milan is a derby. And Christian Pulisic and Yunus Musa and Rafael Leao, they know, honestly, the fans will deal with a loss to Newcastle. They're not going to deal with the loss to these are the last two Scudetti winners, I should say, right? This is going to be a really interesting 5-day period for both of these clubs and the two American players on AC Milan.
All right, score prediction time. Andy Edwards, coming to you first.
It's going to be a thriller. 2-2, I think. The quality is there on both sides, and to all of Nick's points, the Premier League is really hard and takes a lot out of you. And to then shift focus to this big, gigantic thing, it's going to be a tough few weeks for Newcastle. We'll see how Eddie Howe got the dreaded vote of confidence. We'll see how he handles it.
Nick, confident?
No. But I think Milan's very good. And Leao, Chukwueze, Pulisic, Jovic, and the bromance between Pulisic and Giroud is in full form right now, again, as we saw at Chelsea. I got this 2-1 to Milan.
I'm going 2-1 Newcastle. I think it's a perfect situation. They can hit Milan on the counter. I think Milan's given their start to the season. I think they'll be very confident. And I think Newcastle can just, even with some of the injuries they've had early in the season, feel like they're a team that just rises to the big occasion. And there's not much bigger than this, playing at the San Siro, being back in the Champions League. And the Toon Army will be there in full force in Milan. I'm looking forward to seeing some of those scenes from those fans who deserve to be enjoying moments like this, given all of the struggles they've been through over pretty much the last 2 decades on the pitch. So head over to Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. We'll keep you updated with all the news from AC Milan against Newcastle as a couple of American stars come up against the might of the Magpies. And let's see what happens in this massive Champions League game as we kick off the group stage in style.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And for even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock. And be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend on USA Network and on Peacock. We will see you there.